experience. I'm Michelle, I'm the organizer. Just a little kind of overview, layout of what you have in store for today. So we did some networking, check. You guys made some new friends? Got some cool people? Yeah? Nice. Sorry, I also want to double check if the camera's working. Yes? Yeah, okay, cool. Sweet, we're recording this because if you couldn't tell, this was a very popular event and a lot of folks couldn't come. So we're recording for all the folks who couldn't be here. Bye! So I'm going to do a little overview about who we are as a meetup, and I have some big announcements. Then we're going to turn it over to IDEO, our sponsoring venue, and then we actually get to the good stuff, which is the panel. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, you guys. I know, like, a lot of our talks are very good, but I'm especially excited for this because our panelists all come from super really cool and exciting backgrounds, and our moderator's super cool, and they're going to share really great insights that we can all take back to our team. It's going to be great. Then we have some more networking, and then the event ends. The Wi-Fi is IDEO guest, and the password, I'm going to read it out. Yeah? You all ready? Okay. 650-289-3400. Okay, now we're all on the Wi-Fi. Great. Cool. So, welcome! Woohoo! Yeah! Designing using data science ethically, machine learning, UX plus IDEO. Yeah, we made it. I already went to the agenda, sorry. These are new slides. Who are we? Hi, I'm Michelle. If you need to reach me, my email is michelle@MLUXSF.com. What? That's new. Oh, spoiler alerts. Big announcements to come. You may notice a couple of new faces on the slide. That is because we have a brand new steering committee. So, hey, what's up? Shout out to Jason, Nikki, Allison, Maddie, Amy, Tova, Olivia, and Albert. Can you guys raise your hands? Yeah? Woo! Yeah, thank you so much. So these are above and beyond volunteers that are putting in like many hours into like making this meetup possible because this has grown to way more than just me. And I also want to really big thanks to our day of volunteers, Laurent, who's taking photos. Hi, Laurent. Thank you. Yuko. Thank you, Yuko. And Marcel. Thanks, Marcel. You might have met them. They greeted you while you came in. They are also very cool people. Also, a big shout out to Will, who is helping direct people this way too, and who has helped out at past events. So we are all volunteers, and this would not be possible without the help of these folks. So big thank you to these people. They're super cool humans. Go say hi to them afterwards. I also want to give a shout out. This is a fellowship project. This meetup is a fellowship project. You can like wrap your mind around that. We are sponsored by the Center for Technology, Society, and Policy in conjunction with the Algorithmic Fairness and Opacity Working Group over at UC Berkeley, also through the School of Information. That was a lot of words. But very cool projects, very cool other projects that are also sponsored by these fellowships. You can check them out at ctsp.berkeley.edu and afog.berkeley.edu. They pay for all of the nice things that you see today, like our meetup page and our website, our emails and all that stuff too. So without that, we wouldn't have been able to grow to like the size we are now because I would have had to foot it, and I was a grad student for the last year, and that's expensive. So thank you for funding. This is a fellowship project, and this meetup in particular, designing and using data science ethically, is a huge culmination of that fellowship initiative. So thank you so much for joining us if you came from that. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to IDEO. Oh, can we give a round of applause, IDEO? This venue was amazing, and especially thank you to Dan. Dan, can you raise your hand? You're going to speak in a second. But yeah, Dan and I have been working on this for 6 months, at least. Yes. Dan first approached me about this. He's like, this sounds really cool. I want to be this one. Like, IDEO should be the sponsor. We're bigger in space. And I was like, okay, sure. And it's just kind of been like such a whirlwind and fun ride to come up with the questions and kind of think about what we want this to be, what the space to be. Also want to thank Cam and Irma and Sarah and all these other IDEO folks, especially Ian. If Ian's here, he did the AV equipment stuff, so big shout out to Ian who stayed late to help with that. Yeah, thanks Ian. But seriously, thank you so much folks at IDEO, because this is a beautiful venue, and so thank you for having us and hosting us. All right. So, how many of you, this is your first MLUX meetup? Okay, wait, I have to take a photo and we'll understand why in a second. Cute. Oh my gosh, look at all these happy faces. I love it. I also love that there's a bunch of hands that aren't going up anymore, because that's very exciting to me because you're coming back. So welcome all you new faces to the Machine Learning UX Meetup. So when I try to describe this to people, what I tend to think about this is in terms of there's the data side and the UX side. So we can think about this in terms of like how do we design for like really data intensive experiences while we have all these really complex models, how we design experiences around that to maybe make them more transparent, more fair, but also how do we get data to inform and drive design decisions too? What does that actually look like? So we might have people in the audience who come from machine learning, we might have people in the audience that come from design or UX research. So we are a bunch of groups of people, and in fact I want to call out UX isn't just visual design, it's like interaction design, it's information architecture, copywriting, and I'm just lumping everything into data, including machine learning, like artificial intelligence, sure, put it in there, machine learning, statistical inference, whatever. So we're a bunch of different types of folks if we look through the type of people who are registering for this event. So it allows us to do cool stuff like this, machine learning and UX together. So on the left is like Pinterest visual search. So as you go through and scroll and you want to like reseed your search, you can like be like, oh, requery with like this pizza. Like that's a cool thing that machine learning allows us to do, but design actually lets us like surface what that interaction is. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Head nods? Okay. I also really like the Google's autocomplete with the GIFs. I use that one a lot. And one of my favorite case studies is Google's Quick Draw and Auto Draw, how they use the Quick Draw as a game to get a labeled data set that they then built another product, Google Auto Draw, off of. If you don't know of it, totally look it up later. It's very, very cool. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it too. So our vision here at Machine Learning UXSF is we want to create a collaborative environment between UX, data science, and everyone in between. We aim to organize a community that helps foster cooperation, creativity, and learning across disciplines, and our goal is to create a space to discuss human-centered machine learning and share ideas and resources. So what we actually do is we hold regular tech talks and panels on data science, machine learning, AI, and UX design, focused on sharing best practices and lessons learned that practitioners can actually take back with them to their teams, to their companies, to their communities, and actually try to implement some of those changes. And it could be like, hey, this was a failure point, I tried to combine them, or it could be like, hey, this worked really well, and like we should all be doing this. Like, whatever, we're all learning here. No one's an expert in both machine learning and UX, so yeah. And we hold semi-regular networking and happy hours too, so we can meet other folks and build a community. So that's why we give you an hour, or like a half hour before and an hour after, for you guys to all meet each other too, because we hope that you continue this community outside of this space, because we only meet every like month to 6 weeks or so. So please make a friend. We've had a bunch of great talks at Quid, at Autodesk, at Claire Labs, at SAP Innovation with Noodle AI, and at Google. So thank you to our past sponsors too. And you may have discovered us in the past on meetup.com, but surprise, big announcement, we're moving. So you can now find us on MailChimp. So if you have used us on meetup.com before to discover our events, thank you so much. But because a lot of our sponsors require security clearances and like a list of attendees and everything beforehand, and people's like real names and real emails, that's like very important. And sometimes people don't enter that on meetup.com. Subscribe to our MailChimp. If you can't read it, it's bit.ly/MLUX MailChimp, all lowercase. So get on that. That is the best way that you get exclusive MLUX invites. You'll be the first to know. Tell your friends. Is that cool? Yeah? Okay, yeah, you guys are all in it now? Cool. Yeah, so we'll be using the meetup as like a, hey, these are the things that we do, but really if you want to get your tickets for the next event, you should definitely be on that MailChimp, because that's going to be the first place where we post the tickets. And as you can tell, like it's sold out, and we have standing people in the back, so these are very, very popular. Also, we have a website. What? Oh my god, so cool. Ah, no way. So it's definitely a work in progress, but look, this was, you guys did the hand-raising thing too. It was us again, the Invasion. So we have fun, and we have photos up there and past resources. We also have our code of conduct. I'm not going to read through all of it too, but basically like be nice humans, don't harass people, please. By attending this, you're agreeing to the code of conduct. And if there is something that you want to bring to my attention or any of the steering committee, to feel free to just fire us down. And that is both in person and online digitally. So you may notice we have a fresh new look. Wow. Yeah, I know. Isn't it awesome? Like, it looks real good, right? Yeah. That was designed by our very own Tova. Tova, can you raise your hand? Oh my God! Yeah! I think it's super great. I'm super into it. I love all the little people and little robots because we're all working together, do machine learning, UX. You can check out more of our work at tovadesign.com. I also just tweeted about it too, and I was kind of bummed because nobody liked it. So, oh wait, that wasn't the Twitter. Okay, this one is how you can discover more about our past meetups. We have a YouTube page. Big shout out, thank you, Nikki, for getting us set up on our MLUX meetup past videos. So we'll hopefully be posting this video there. And this is our Twitter. Yeah, that's what I was pointing to. So we have a Twitter. Yeah, woo! Right now, I'm the one running the Twitter, and I've been posting some pretty sick GIFs, and like only Kathy Baxter, who was our speaker and like head of Salesforce AI ethics, has been liking them. So like, what? You guys should like go and like check it out. I post cool stuff. I post bios about our speakers, cool things that our past groups have shared with us too. Like Clara Labs, they did a really cool human-in-the-loop machine learning like post talk. So I posted that. Anyways. It's cool. Check it out. Yeah, okay, this is the fun part. This is why we're a community. We're going to do an icebreaker. So turn to someone next to you, and you're going to meet them, and just say hi. Cool. I'll let you know when you're done.
I'm Christine. Save that
What does MLUX mean?
For me, it's about problem solving. We have designers who want to solve a problem, and machine learning is a tool that you can use to solve problems. So for me, I'm a designer, so using machine learning in the design is really a new way of, relatively new way of solving a problem. An extra power.
Have you been with MLUX for a long time?
Huh?
Have you been volunteering here?
Volunteering, right? Recently, but I've been coming to this meetup like since it started. Yeah, and I really like Michelle. Like, good person. Everything is trying to be free.
Can you hear me? Hi. Wow, I don't know if it's like this PA system is just very good, and you guys get very quiet very fast, or if it's just the topic, and you guys are like, yes, we're here for it. So, did you guys meet someone cool? Yeah? Yes? Oh, cool. You know someone you could grab coffee with afterwards, make a friend, continue this conversation after. Big shout out, this meetup cannot happen without you. I'm pointing to all of you and putting your responsibility back on me. Are you working as a UX designer for machine learning? Are you a data scientist solving problems around experiences? Do you do research into perceptions around machine learning and data science interfaces? Do you blend ML and AI seamlessly into your user experience? We want to hear from you. Also, we need sponsors at venues, we need people who would like to give talks, and we need volunteers, no ML UX experience needed. Also, we need videographers, because there were 4 of us trying to set up the video if you saw that earlier today. We have no idea what we're doing. And we also need your feedback. You, if you are interested, if you're like, hey, this sounds cool, I'm gonna get involved, it's as little of a lift as you want or as big of a lift as you want. Tova just approached me and was like, hey, I can do the branding. And I was like, sure, we need that. And look, now it looks great. So, same with Nikki. Nikki was just like, hey, you guys should have a YouTube page. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she's like, don't worry, I solved it for you. All of this is through volunteers, and YouTube can be that solution. So we are humans at MLUXSF.com. Isn't that good? Yeah, right? You're team, no robots, no, we're humans. Anyways, okay. That's enough about me and MLUX. I'm going to turn it over to Dan to give a little spiel from IDEO. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. A couple of awkward slides. Before I start, I will say Michelle is very humble. So 2 things I wanted to say. One is to start and run something that's successful at grad school is actually incredibly difficult. You may think you have lots of free time when you're at grad school, but having been there, you don't. It's really hard, and just seeing this crowd, I'm pretty amazed at what you've been able to do and still keep doing. So first thing. Second thing, Michelle said nobody's an expert at machine learning and UX, and I would say that one of the people who I would say is as close to an expert as you can get is Michelle. If you want to hear more about machine learning UX, especially around a very interesting topic related to sound design and sound interfaces, Michelle is your person, and I don't know really anybody else who's really, you can call an expert or specialist in that. So there's your conversation and coffee talk with Michelle, and I'm thoroughly embarrassed there. So now I will stop talking about her and just talk about me. So thank you for coming. It is so nice to see all of you here. We have been talking about this for a long time. My name is Dan. I think you've gotten that already. I'm a design researcher in IDEO San Francisco. I'm a director who helps guide our design research craft up here, as well as focuses a lot of my time on our media and technology work here and also across the globe. I'm just going to assume some of you may know something about IDEO, some of you don't. I'm going to spend a few minutes just saying who we are. And the describing who we are really will eventually lead into saying something about how we approach our work and what that might have to say about thinking about data and ethics. Because I hope the point I want to convey is that this is a topic that at IDEO we are passionate about. And we're passionate about it because everyday people out in the world doing their things and cultures and societies have always been sort of central and core to all the work we've done. So ethics is a nice place for us to be and thinking about. So we are a global design and innovation firm. And our purpose in life and in the world is to create positive and disproportionate impact through design. And so you'll see the word design everywhere, and everybody always asks, what do we mean by design? So preempting that question, design for us means a lot of things. So we design physical products. That's kind of our origins in the world. So we did the first commercial mouse for Apple back in the day. We've done a lot of physical products like that. We designed whole experiences. Recently, redesigned the whole voter experience for LA County, the largest jurisdiction in the United States. And we design new ventures. So we work, for example, working with Pacific Life, launched a new socially responsible investing business for them. So if you want to go invest with intention, you go to Swell. We also design whole systems. So we designed a whole school system in Peru. We've worked for large governments designing whole food systems and things like that, and also organizations. So we do a lot of different design in a lot of different ways. And getting to what we're talking about today, new forms of quantitative data collection, data in a quantitative sense. The gathering and use of this is incredibly important to consider as we think about work that gets more and more complex, whether it's from product systems or just more complex in the world today. And so in today's world at IDEO, we like to talk about systems that augment intelligence at really multiple levels, at a human level, an organizational level, and a cultural level. So why augmented intelligence? Why am I using this word? And for us, this is really about designing how machines can serve people. It's not about replicating humans in a machine. So we believe that data science, machine learning, all the other techniques you threw up on the slides before, they can help us design intelligent product services systems that help improve people's everyday lives. And hopefully that makes sense. And we believe that in order to have really positive and disproportionate impact, the kind of impact we'd like to have in the world, these augmented powered technologies must be grounded in human and social needs, desires, wants that really work to extend and enhance our capabilities, not replace them. But of course, this raises all sorts of ethical questions, which is of course why we're all here this evening. So I'm going to talk about ethics in a second, but I think it's to understand our position and how we think about ethics, it's important to understand a little bit more about how we work. So backing up a few hundred feet, some of you may have seen this before. We've always seen invention and innovation as the intersection of these three areas: people, business, and technology, or desirability, viability, and feasibility. But though innovation starts in the middle of all this, we always start with people. People are at the center of all the work we do. We make sure we are working with people from start to finish on any project, any program, anything we do. And the way we think about people is how we define the approach of our work. So our general approach, whether it involves data science or not, is first, we think of ourselves as operating with a lot of holism, empathy for people, which means that whether we're at the first day of a project or the last day of the project, we are trying to get out in the world and understand people where they are in their context, in their social worlds, not in ours, and see things from their points of view. And of course, that means not just one point of view, but multiple points of view and bringing them together. Mixed method and design-led. I think IDEO is often known for a lot of work that we've done that's very intense qualitative research and going out into the field and being all over the world and doing things like that. Sure, we do that, but we've also done, for now, quite some time, methods from a variety of areas. And I think whether it's quantitative methods, qualitative methods, and that can be from exploratory research, exploratory design efforts, to validation or whatever. And I think a key piece for us is that we're very design-led. We're always thinking about what are we trying to make and put out in the world that can help improve people's lives. And then finally, you see multidisciplinary and collaborative. If you've ever worked with us or seen one of our spaces, we have teams of people who are all working together who represent very different backgrounds in terms of their skills, their experiences, their personal backgrounds. And we believe that fundamentally the best ways to creative problem solving comes from this intertwining of multiple perspectives. And unfortunately, one of the panelists who was going to be here from IDEO can't make it tonight, but he was actually going to speak a lot of the grounding of our ethical perspective in this work comes from this multidisciplinarity and the multiple perspectives in the project team. So to do crafts, you see some of our crafts over here and people who work together. They have to support these efforts, the efforts of augmented intelligence work. And our most recent development in the last couple of years is really developing data science as a craft for IDEO. They sit side by side with design researchers, interaction designers, graphic designers, writers, and others to bring ideas to life. So data scientists are new, you're special, but hey, you're not that special. You're just one more awesome way to contribute to the design process. And so if you think about the way we work with all these perspectives, in a way we're doing what we've always done when we talk about data science. We're really humanizing technology. And so some things about IDEO haven't changed, even though we're incorporating these new crafts. And we want to say, to think about ethics, then we can find inspiration on thinking about data and ethics and how we've tackled tough ethical challenges over the past few decades. So I'm going to turn for a quick second to thinking about ethics. So a few years ago, I'll hold this up, we published this book maybe 4 years ago, The Little Book of Design Research Ethics, and it came as the result of it's a very small book, which is interesting for a very weighty and meaty topic. But the kind of distillation to a small book came after like years and years of actually bringing a lot of experts together from around the world, people who are like ethicists, philosophers, folks who have thought about new technology and ethics for the last 20, 30 years. And so what it's meant to be is a practical guide for bringing ethics to research that informs the design process. You can get a digital version for free at that URL, which is an acronym for a little book on design research ethics at IDEO.com. You can buy a physical copy; they're fun, but obviously we want it out in the world. And we anchor this guide in three principles: respect, responsibility, and honesty. I'll come back to those in a minute. And so the principles that we outline here are really based in a long history of ethics and research primarily, but because our research participants are actually current or hypothetical customers, they're just people, and so they're also relevant to this is actually, you find relevant to not just research, but anything that we make or put out in the world. So in the next few minutes, when we go through the principles, if you hear me talk about participants, you can also just substitute whatever word you want to use to describe the people who who you want to, or who love using your products, services, experiences, spaces, or whatever it is the work that you do. Your constituents, your stakeholders. So let me go through these three principles very quickly. Respect is the first one. So we talk about honoring our participants' limits and valuing their comfort. And the kind of questions that we ask for that is, are we treating participants as people, as collaborators rather than subjects? Are we aware and considerate of their cultural expectations, their sensitivities that are at play? Are the actions that we're taking when we're hanging out with them and doing things with them, are they thoughtful? Are they kind? So that's the kind of questions around respect. Responsibility. Are we confident? So responsibility is all about acting to protect people's current and future interests. Obviously, a very hard thing to do since it's hard to predict the future, but we do our best. And so, are we confident that our research isn't harmful to our participants? Are they aware of the consequences of what they're sharing with us? Do we have their consent? They know what's going on. Are we safeguarding their information? Information that ultimately could compromise who they are in some way? Are we safeguarding, respectful of that, and responsible with what they're telling us? And then finally, honesty. And with honesty, meaning we're really truthful, try to be truthful and timely in all communication, either with them or about them. So are we doing our best not to mislead people or leave them with false impressions? How and when do we identify ourselves, what we're doing, and what the intended outcome of their involvement in our research? And then if you go to the book, we take these three principles, we show how it might apply over the course of a research process, from planning and preparation to gathering information to using and sharing. But the point here is more broadly, it's not just about research, it's also about any other piece of your work. So you could talk about requirements planning, requirements gathering, product development, iteration, prototyping, feedback. These three principles apply there as well. And so even though the guidelines were developed to think about research, we think that it's all about the design of the actual things. And it's especially applicable in today's world with data products and services, because data, in a sense, are traces of human behavior. And so the products themselves are part of this weird research process. So the translation of our ethical principles to data science is something that we're actually right now in the process of doing. So this is a coming soon announcement. We are coming out with a set of tools and resources around ethical practices and designing with data. Would have been nice if they were like, everything was buttoned up and ready to go this evening. They're not, but they're working hard. What this is going to include are common human-centered data-focused considerations, prompts for your team's conversation, exercises to help your teams evaluate ethical issues relating to data, stories and examples, and that's probably the most important thing, is often you need to see real concrete stories to know how you might want to act. And so as a sneak preview, I'm going to quickly walk you through the 4 key themes that tie these different pieces together. So the first theme, data is not truth. Data is created, generated, collected, captured, and extended by humans, by us, by all of you. That's why it's always incomplete. That's why it's messy. It needs to be derived and interpreted and analyzed. It can be biased in terms of what's included or excluded, how it's interpreted, and how it's presented. So unpacking how the humanity is present in data is pretty essential to understanding it and how it can best serve our needs. Number 2, just because AI can do something doesn't mean it should. So we come from a position that we don't presume that AI is desirable. It might be, it might not be. So we really want to explore how human needs and human agency interacts with these intelligent systems, and how it's a kind of a never-ending process. It's not just over once you make the thing. Number 3, big topic obviously is privacy, but beyond privacy, which has certain the word itself has certain kind of cultural baggage. It's also the collective good, as we want to talk about here. So while there are policies and laws that shape governance and collection, and probably GDPR is something on everybody's lips today, we must hold ourselves really to a higher standard than will we get sued. And that's not an ethical stance, it's a legal stance. So we should consider the potential design and governance use of data for all these new purposes that ensure how people understand how data is going to be used. And finally, another buzzword, unintended consequences is a big one out in the world today. So these unintended consequences are certainly challenges, but they're also huge opportunities for design and making things better. And so we are aware as well as anybody that we do not always get it right the first time, the second time, the third time. So as we should be looking out for unearthing these unknowns and newly discovered consequences as a starting point for more iteration and more opportunity, and try to be as humble as we can with the people who we're trying to serve. So this work will be coming out in more, I can't promise any dates, but we're hopefully getting some of this out in a series of articles and downloads in the next month or so. You probably see this around. We're hiring. I gotta have the plug for hiring. We are excited. We know this is an untapped field. Really, what data science is. It's still relatively new out in the world, and how it integrates with design is incredibly new. So we would love to hear from you. So you can see, I think there's some cards around in the poster. And otherwise, I'm going to get out of the way and turn things over to our panel in a second and say thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it. It's so nice to have you all here.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Cool. Thanks. Oh, that's perfect. That's the perfect size. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you, Dan. Yes, I am so excited for those cards. Those are tools like that I'm really excited for because I think they're really great resources for people to take them back to their teams and try it out. So thank you for sponsoring this event, for telling us about that, for the little book of research ethics. I just tweeted about it too. Also, I put out the call out in real life for tweets, and then my phone totally blew up. You all are amazing, and I just got so many tweets back. So hey, what's up? Hey, I promise I'll do good gifts from now on. GIFs. Now to the fun part. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, so we have an amazing panel lined up for designing and using data science ethically. Just to kind of set the ground rules, our goals as a meetup for this, and I've shared this with our panelists too, but we really want this to be a tangible practice for you. We want you to take back nuggets of really good information to your teams and actually implement whatever you find, tweet about it, whatever. Share it out. But really share best practices with what you are actually implementing on products. And I think we chose some really awesome speakers today. Sorry, I'm giggling so much because our speakers are, sorry, I know you guys are all sitting right here, even our moderator too. They are all rock stars in their own way, and they have just amazing experience and just amazing insights that they're going to be sharing with us about how they actually think about ethics in terms of UX and data science. So we also want you to make connections and conversations to help inspire all of us to think about ethics in our normal practice. I think I'm preaching to the choir here because we're all here because we like this topic too. But this is a group and a community that's very inspired and passionate about this topic. And so I know sometimes it can be a little bit hard when we're the world out there. But we all care about ethics and we think that it's important. We think that it's important to take it back to our team. So make these connections here, carry on those conversations outside. And I think it's really important too to normalize the discussion of ethics and what we do. I think the best case in point is that no one was saying machine learning and UX a year ago, and now it's a thing, and people guys all show up to this meetup, and I've seen job descriptions around it too. So who knows? Maybe everybody will be CEOs, chief ethics officers. Thank you. I'll be here all night. Also, I know that the thing is kind of cut off at the bottom, but we're going to be doing questions a little bit differently. Looks like some of you already have your Twitter wings, but we're going to be tweeting questions at MLUXSF. If you want to throw some hashtags in there too, sure, data ethics, that sounds great. MLUX, well, that's great. So tweet your questions at MLUXSF. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. We're also going to set up the panel a little bit different. Should I talk about Christian I'm really excited because I'm going to introduce our moderator for tonight. It's not going to be me. Congratulations. It is going to be Sherry Long, who is amazing. I'm going to let her introduce herself too, but she's actually the original reason why I thought that this would be a really great event of interest to everybody. How many of you might have been at the Autodesk event? Yeah? Oh, wow, there's some people. Yeah. Okay, there were like 200 people at that event, so that thank you for coming back. Sometimes the days don't line up, so hey, thanks. So Sherry approached me after the event and said, hey, this is a really cool community. You should do an ethics event. And I was like, yes, I'm so into it. Let's do it. And she's like, great. Okay, how do we do it? And then, like, some months go by and everything too, but Sherry actually had a lot of great insights and thoughts, and she, on her own free time, has organized a lot of community events around ethics and technology and a bunch of other disciplines. So she was like literally the perfect person to moderate this panel, and she just has an awesome new job at the EFF, so woo! Congratulations, Sherry. Okay. I'm gonna let Sherry introduce herself, and then we're also gonna allow the panelists to introduce themselves really quickly too. About 5 minutes-ish. Yeah? Okay, cool. And then we'll do the questions. Yay!
Hi everybody, I'm Sherry Long. I'm not a data scientist at all. I have a background in art. I majored in Shakespeare with a minor in conceptual art. But, so I was working at Autodesk. I was running their artist in residence program where they bring in technologists, and they teach them how to use robots, they give them lots of resources, and all these artists make cool stuff, and you kind of just watch it rain. It's really amazing. And I started learning a lot more about technology, meeting really great people, and learning a lot about ethical problems, and it was riled up. And I now work at the EFF as of yesterday. Yay. I know, it's like you're like a superhero. It's so great. It's so cool. I'm so excited. But I started Ethics and Technology Dinner Salon about 1.5 years ago. So there's a lot of people who know what they're doing with data science, and that's not what I can bring to it. So what I do is get everybody else talking. It's not because I'm good at dinner parties. And I know a lot of people, and it's gotten pretty cool. We had Richard Stallman at one, pretty rad. But I pick out people that have like a widespread breadth of knowledge. So we've got economists, artists, of course. There'll be like random poets, sociologists, a psychologist, a philosopher, architect, doctors, all different kind of things, because you really need that background when you're dealing with something that is as difficult as ethics and data science. It is complex, it is complicated, it's not an easy thing, and it just needs a lot more voices in the mix. And these are some of the other little spot highlights that we talk about that I'm interested in, and we seem to be focusing a lot on those subjects. I do them monthly, and I keep them small, and I keep them private so people can freely talk, because we're trying to problem solve, and then we get that information, people go back to their other jobs, and they like bring it forth and put it out there. Oh wait, hey, I got a hands up thing. So hands up, who's taking a computer science class? I thought so. All right. Art history? Yay, awesome. Okay, maybe you'll recognize this. How do I use slides? Wait, no. Dyslexia. Anyone recognize this painting? All right, great. What can artists bring to this data science topic? This is an illustration of old myth, Greek myth, Ovid, of Icarus and Daedalus. So up here, you have a tiny little, I guess that's supposed to be the labyrinth that they were trapped in. It's a dad and his son. You probably read this in 4th grade. So Daedalus, he's an inventor. He's a technologist, and he invents wings. And he finds little birds, they're flying by, he captures them, he's like, wow. So he puts the wings together, he's like, we're gonna make our escape. And his son's like, great. Dad's like, hold on, don't fly too high, you'll fly close to the sun and wax will melt, and don't fly too low, because then your wings will get wet and you will drown. He's like, okay, I got it. And then those are his legs there. Because you see what happens when you're using something for the first time, like flight. We're really excited. No one's ever flown before. They are the first people to fly, and in that excitement, you kind of fall. But what art is bringing into this conversation, and that's the myth that we all know, is not that story. That's a very small, minor point. What we have here is the everyday people. They're like the center point of the story. It's like a man is plowing. There's a shepherd. He's looking the other direction. There's a guy fishing. You know, all this stuff is going on. Everyday life is going on. These people are just, you know, they're just humans living their things. All this stuff is happening, and it's relevant to them, but they don't notice it, right? And they're not part of that dialogue. And what we have here with those little legs is not one man. I hear that some other company that's pretty big has over 1 billion active users a day. So those are like 1 billion little legs, right? Anyway, so now that, so that's kind of like what an artist can sort of bring into this dialogue, I think. And it's, you guys all know a lot about that, the science part of it. And you can kind of take that story now and use it in your own stories. And next, we've got, oh.
Hello. Oh, hi. Yep, shall I just go ahead? I'm Elizabeth Churchill, and my background, or my interest is human-computer interaction and user experience, and design research and all things related. I'm currently a director of user experience at Google, and I head up research for material design and Flutter, amongst other things. And as it says up there, I have a background in experimental psychology, and then I did my master's in artificial intelligence. It's called knowledge-based systems back in the mumble days, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we thought about AI and machine learning then and what has changed. I'm also the executive vice president of the ACM, which is the Association for Computing and Machinery. So those are my various hats, and I'll try and bring some of those different perspectives to bear today. Oh, here we go. All right, so here's the story. So over here is AI back in the day when I was doing machine learning. We used to have data sets that were, pretty close, pretty small data sets and highly curated and generated. We understood the provenance of the data, and we did things like cognitive modeling and cognitive architectures and modeling. And we did things like intelligent tutoring systems, which were augmentation. And my master's thesis was, in fact, on building a system that would learn what students could do based on some, ideas of the learning trajectory. And the reason I want to bring that up is because the data was very curated, and it was a deep design material for pedagogy. So the data was a design material. What we did was we gathered what students were doing, and we did deep analysis, and then we made predictions about what kinds of errors they were going to make. This was what we would call small data, not big data at scale, because it was data from one individual student at a time who could generate quite a lot of data points, by the way, to deeply understand their learning process and their needs. And so I wanted to just point that out because it was bounded and curated. And at all points, the data was, a real design material for pedagogical practice. And the reason that's a monkey is because, has everybody heard of the monkeys and bananas problem? One of the sort of interesting things about intelligence was this idea that monkeys are very smart. And so if you put a bunch of bananas on a hook where they can't reach it, a bunch of boxes in a room, they're incredibly creative, and they will figure out that if you stack the boxes, you can get up to the bananas. And what's lovely about that is that, they're not doing deduction, they're doing induction and abduction, all kinds of really interesting processes. And they have data, and they look for data, and then they put things together, and they achieve their goals. So that's why we've got a monkey over there. Because I wanted to also say that, that kind of creative process is very important. So just doing sort of deductive work over data is not what we do as intelligence, not what monkeys do, but it's what a lot of notional AI systems do. So data provenance and thinking about these bigger creative processes, I think, is one of the points. The second bit is where I think where we are now, and there's a lot of people who are super excited about data, super excited, but they're not looking around them, they're not listening around them, and we don't know how to talk about it. So another one of my points I want to make today is that ethics and ethical data use and ethical systems, can sound so lofty, but it's actually a daily practice. Being ethical is a practice. It's about listening to other alternative points of view. It's about questioning, and it's about talking. And so one of the tidbits to take away tonight for me is that we all are embodied ethical machines, and I want you to go back and take the value of this as a community. So if you're the single person at work, who's trying to push on the boundaries, you've got this community with you, behind you, and that you can be a squeaky wheel and start to look around you, listen to other perspectives, and ask questions. Ethics is a daily practice, and questioning ethics is a daily practice. It's not just a lofty goal, but someone else will come up with guidelines for you. So if there's a UX of ML and AI, you are part of the user experience of the world, not just the things you build. Finally, we've got my favorite, which is the chaos monkey. Who's heard of the chaos monkey? So the chaos monkey was a thing that Netflix, I think about 2011, came up with, and it was part of a way of testing their infrastructure resilience. And so the chaos monkey would go through their systems and shut down, production computers and servers and so forth randomly to see if their system was resilient. And what I love about that is that it's a very different way of thinking of evaluation. It's a very different way of thinking of questioning, which is you don't go in to prove your point. You don't go in to confirm your assumptions. You go in with an idea of breakage. How do I break this system? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And how is my machine learning, AI, user experience, system working? What data do I need to look for to see what's missing, what's wrong? How do I break it? How many people in this room have tested demos? And you go into an early demo, and do you just go in there with that sense of glee to see if you can break it? Because you want to kind of figure it out, right? So resilience engineering is about going in and breaking things. And what I would like for us is to do a daily practice of testing the resilience of the assumptions as well as the technical infrastructures that are being built. Go in and be the chaos monkey. And I think together we can start to really push some of the questions forward. So those were the points I wanted to make, and I also love monkeys. So this was a great excuse.
Okay, hi. My name is Stuart Geiger. I am a staff ethnographer at UC Berkeley's Institute for Data Science. I'm an ethnographer that's trained in the tradition of anthropology. So I'm not a data scientist originally by training. My undergraduate was in philosophy. And I study data scientists, and I study how people use data science in various contexts. I got my PhD from UC Berkeley at the School of Information, where actually you can go the next transition, where I did a lot of work studying Wikipedia, which is a very different and interesting context because it's a nonprofit sort of community of people, and I was looking at how the community comes to consensus and makes decisions about what kinds of automation and data science and machine learning they're using, particularly in things like content moderation, for example. Like every other platform, Wikipedia has to deal with a lot of people who come in, and so sometimes they make good contributions and sometimes they don't. And one of the things that I saw in that context is that there's a lot of times where we talk about machine learning as sort of a black box and sort of automation as these things that sort of obscure decision making. But I found that in particular ways, this could be sort of moments where when you sort of have the Wikipedia community has sort of strong sort of principles of open participation, and in some cases the introduction of these methods and these technologies could serve as a catalyst for broader discussions and conversations about what Wikipedia is as a community, what kind of knowledge that they want. And if it's scaffolded sort of in the right way with the right sort of human policies and the right human norms and the right sort of structures of participation, those conversations could be very generative and constructive. But another way is sort of there's also other ways to think about the way that community it adopts different kinds of methods based on different kinds of problems that it's facing at any particular moment. And so it's also important to think about the particular situations about it. For example, a big controversy comes in, and all of a sudden a lot of people enter a discussion over a topic that sort of maybe they sort of weren't following originally. And it's important to understand that you don't need to to have a social system in addition to a technological system. And you need that social system to incorporate people who don't have the expertise in computer science and machine learning. And in some ways, the Wikipedia community has done this in good ways. In some ways, sort of it has sort of room for improvement to make. But I think it's a really interesting counter case to look at in comparison, because a lot of you probably work for companies that have a different business model that maybe aren't. Wikipedia has sort of the luxury of sort of not being sort of accountable. They don't have to sort of have the same kind of incentives that often are sort of the tensions that are caused by, for example, needing to maximize, for example, advertising revenue or things like that. But one of the things that's also important to think about that is that no matter what situation you are, even in a nonprofit situation, even in an academic context, for example, there's always a bottom line. And so it's important to think about what the trade-offs are when it comes to ethics, because ethics is always a trade-off between various kinds of things. Ethics is a set of conversations about where we want to go and what we think the good life is. And I think it's important to think about ethics as a conversation, as opposed to, and I believe we're listening to it, as opposed to a set of prescriptive guidelines that someone's sort of going to give you. So how do we foster and facilitate good conversations, good supporting structures, and how do we think about the social system that is going to then lead to people who are building technological systems? You go to the next condition. I now spend a lot of time looking at how scientists are using machine learning, and that's also a very different context as well. I think it's important and interesting to think about what we can sort of learn from this context as well. A lot of scientific research is going through things might be familiar with, like the reproducibility crisis, or the sort of issues around how the validity of scientific findings. And I think it's very interesting to look at how scientists in academic settings are using machine learning, and the issues that sort of arise around how do we know what we know, what can we take from that and sort of apply to sort of other contexts. And I want to sort of conclude also by sort of way of thinking about it. I didn't have time to, I actually thought about this on the way here. I didn't have time to put sort of image in the slide, but sort of imagine sort of in thinking about ethics, there's two ways that you can sort of think about it. And sort of imagine a bridge. Imagine we think about this in the traditional engineering context of ethics. In engineering, if you think about engineering a bridge, there's one set of ethical questions that sort of can be defined and understood within the context of engineering on its own tools and its own methods. For example, if you are an engineer and you build the building and the building is built with substandard materials, or it's not engineered in a particular way that leads it to sort of fall down, or the people around it don't provide proper maintenance, then that is also that this can be considered sort of an ethical violation. But those are sort of things that can be understood in terms of engineering. But there's also a whole set of other ethical questions that we can consider more political ethics. Things like, when we're building this bridge, do we build it exclusively for cars, or do we include public transit lanes, do we include a rail line in it? Where do we build this bridge? Do we build it in this location or this other location? When we're sort of maximizing costs, or when we're think about costs, but what's the trade-off between the way that we build a bridge? For one, there are certain sort of ways that you can build a bridge that might have to displace more neighborhoods. You might have to bulldoze a particular set of neighborhoods to get one design that might be sort of cheaper, might be more expensive. Sort of think about a different set of designs that might sort of displace sort of fewer. And so this is those are sort of questions that can't be answered within the existing tools of engineering. So when we think about this in the machine learning space, I think it's important to think about what are the kinds of ethical quandaries that can be solved with the existing sort of tools, thinking about like bias in training data sets, for example, or thinking about certain ways we can define and sort of quantify certain understandings of privacy. And what are some things where we have to go beyond that? We have to answer questions where there is no sort of thing, there's nothing inside of the disciplines of machine learning that can do that. So I think that's a useful distinction that we think. That I'll sort of hand it over.
Hi, I'm Kristian Lum. I definitely come from the ML more than UX side of things, so that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about. And when Michelle asked me to talk, it's going to be crazy or nothing about UX, but I have to say that this panel, after hearing this introduction, seems like it's going to be extremely easy. I'm not sure I've ever been on a panel before where I'm like, yeah, I could probably just sit wherever people said, or just, after that introduction from Dan, be like, yeah, he already made a lot of my main points, so could we please go back to those slides because they were, much prettier than the ones I'm going to show you. But in any case, with that said, it's perfect. It's a real pleasure to be here. I am the lead statistician at the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. I work in fair machine learning, fair algorithms, things like that. The next slide right now. And at HRDAG, one of the things we try to think about quite a bit, this sort of underlying question that really drives a lot of our work, is what's missing from data and what are the effects of what's in particular what's systematically missing from data. So I have two examples here because the ex-academic in me can't not put up some figures. Sorry about that. But so we have two examples here. And I was going to go into the field about how data isn't necessarily truth. It is generated by human actions, but Dan already did that in the very beginning, so I think we're all on the same page with that. I don't really have to convince you of that too much, but in this case, we are looking at the number of killings in Kosovo during the conflict. And if we were to look at the number of killings that were recorded in the data that we had, we just collected from a variety of sources. We take the union of all those sources, combine them, we would have gotten this pattern you see from the gray bars here, which would be that they're the most killings or most deaths in the eastern region. But that's, again, data that's generated by human action, so people going out and investigating where things are happening, often at the time of the conflict, things like that. There might be reasons why people don't report some deaths that occur. People might be afraid to report their family members missing. It's pretty chaotic during conflict times, and there's a lot of sort of resource constraints where organizations can't collect all the data they like. So if we're going to use the data as is without understanding the data generating mechanism or really accounting for what's missing, we would conclude in this case that there are the most killings in the east. And so one of the things that's really our bread and butter at Human Rights Data Analysis Group is taking multiple sources of information, combining them using statistical methods to estimate what's not accounted for on any of the different sources of information. This sounds kind of like magic, and to be honest, the first time I heard about it, it kind of feels like magic even still sometimes, but it's not. It's based on principled mathematical reasoning, how we come up with those estimates. And when we did those estimates months ago, we found that actually when we tried to estimate the number of deaths that were not reported on any of the lists, really the pattern should look more like where the black bars come up to on this one, which tells a completely different story about the dynamics of the conflict. And then decades later, or a decade later or so, another organization went in and sort of tried to track down every single person they thought could have possibly ever been killed during this conflict, and they came up with the numbers. We think that effort was much more, it included pretty much everybody based on, sort of having a lot more time. I think it took them nearly a decade to complete this sort of census of killings, and they found a pattern. We're showing the trials up there, sort of demonstrated the benefit of having done this analysis of thinking about what wasn't available to any of the data sets at the time. Another example, that's one example of how we try to think really carefully about what's missing from the data and how that might affect policy decisions, right? If you conclude that one region has more killings than another, that might lead you to erroneous conclusions about which policies were working. Maybe something was working on the east or the west, you might want to replicate those differences if, based on faulty information. The other way we think about this, and this is obviously very related, this is very busy picture, I'll just stand up 7 point things, is how what's missing from your data impacts predictions that will come out of models that you use that data to fit. So suppose we have this data up here in the upper left-hand corner, which is the Oakland PD drug crime reports from 2010. And we see where most of the police knowledge of drug crimes was. It was up in the circle and along that line. So we can compare that to the demographic profile, the racial dot map here of Oakland, and we find that really most of the enforcement of drug laws in Oakland was taking place in West Oakland, which is populated mostly by these green dots, with each one representing a black person, and along this corridor here, which is mostly Hispanic, maybe mostly Hispanic. When we applied a real predictive policing algorithm to this data, so predictive policing is taking police records, fitting machine learning models to them to make predictions about where to deploy the police in the future, we found that we get this map of where the deployment should take place on the basis of this data. So again, this data over here, Oakland Police Drug Crime Reports, is generated by institutional policy of how to police, about community reports, and about potentially biased human reasoning about which sorts of things to record. So again, data isn't truth, it's generated by these human actions. When we fit a machine learning model to that data, we end up saying go back to those exact same neighborhoods where, at least based on some additional analysis we did, we believe there was over-policing and over-enforcement of. So that is the other way in which we think very carefully about how what's missing from your data can affect real life. So the two sort of conclusions here are like, one, it can affect your life because you come to erroneous conclusions about what's happened in the past, and two, it can affect and sort of it can exacerbate biases that already exist in the past as you use this to make decisions going forward into the future.
This is a really great panel. Thank you, Michelle, for getting everybody together. You did a great job. And thank you, audience. Not everybody comes to these things. This is a pay attention kind of thing. And there's a waiting list. That makes me really excited about how much interest there is in data science and ethics. So, Stuart, you kind of touched upon it in your first initial blurb on the elephant in the room, as I kind of think of it, with data and ethics. There's a lot of trade-offs, right? So how do we get other people to consider ethics a priority in their business requirements?
I can, all right. Well, so I think one thing is if we take a very expansive understanding of what ethics is, you can understand that sort of ethics is about, if you think about ethics as values, everyone has values. And this is a different way, ethics can be defined in so many different ways. So if you think about it as what are the values people have, the business bottom line case is a value as well. And I think it's important in having those conversations to sort of put those on equal par as values with other kinds of values that it might have. And so I think the way that I've seen this in, not in the case from necessarily the corporate sort of side, but with the Wikipedia community, I've definitely seen trade-offs between different sort of goals and values. For sort of the, for example, with one of the sort of major sort of moderation tools in Wikipedia, it's sort of they had this sort of massive trade-off between efficiency and false positives. So you could have moderators who are, because they're all volunteers, they want to minimize the amount of work they do. And so do you have that, and you have them sort of review sort of fewer ones and have a less accurate sort of fiction and might sort of remove cases that they shouldn't have removed or miss things that they should have removed? Or do you sort of give them more work and sort of make the data more accurate and then sort of put more of a burden on it? I think it's important to sort of just at least sort of put those sort of values in conversation with each other and say, this is a decision, that we have defaults that we often make, but force the fact that sort of a decision needs to be made between two values on the same board.
Pretty obvious. So I think there are a couple ways that this is happening right now. I think companies are realizing that even from a completely selfish and financial perspective, it's actually not great to have some sort of expose come out that shows that your tool or your product is supervised. And I think there's sort of increasing incentives for those sort of exposés to come out. We've seen that as a popular genre both in sort of academic publishing and journalism. And some examples are, there are some great papers on facial recognition software, performing poorly, particularly on women's cases, Google Translate issue, where if you were to translate from a language without gender pronouns, so I guess instead they are a doctor, we'll have to he is a doctor and they are a nurse, or she is a nurse, or they I'm using sort of as a gender neutral pronoun because British, that was another one that came up, and I think ends up being a little bit embarrassing. And of course, the ProPublica article about Facebook housing ads being able to be targeted. You weren't really supposed to be able to target people with ads. It's not like demographics that are legally not allowed to do that. So I think, so the bad press that comes from these type of exposés is increasingly being acknowledged as something that's not necessarily great, and I'm hoping that at least for smaller companies, maybe the benefit of having done that would be outweighed by the bad press they would get. So I'm seeing that as something that might be one lever to pull to get companies to behave more ethically. Another thing we've seen really recently actually is employees taking a stand. So we saw that at Google with Maven. I think it was a drone program. You're probably hearing more about that than I do. And then also Microsoft had a contract with ICE, and I think was recently a bunch of employees took a stand against that, and they had some action on both of those fronts. And so those are sort of two, I don't know, maybe ways from within a company that could happen. And I expect that, in terms of employees really taking a stand, I expect to see that more going forward, because as this field of fairness and accountability and transparency, machine learning and data science really takes off, we're seeing a lot more curriculum at the undergraduate level being introduced to address these issues. So hopefully the next generation of designers and engineers coming forward will have these at the forefront of their minds when they're being asked to design various tools and have the language and the principles to really start thinking about those things from the get-go.
I think I agree with all of that, and sort of like to think of basic human motivations, and describing those at a bigger scale. So if we think of vanity as one, helping companies and helping groups understand that you could do it better and do it differently and behave ethically and actually be, interrogate what you're doing is a really good thing, right? So we're trying to do the best, and here are the practical ways in which we're saying it's not a vision statement, it's a practical accomplishment. Another thing I think is, when I used to teach years ago, I used to teach human factors and ergonomics and information design, and I used to start every semester, with the new students with a reportage of an air crash, sort of ambulance chasing kind of stories, because it would get everybody's attention. So sensationalism does get attention. And I think we just had some beautiful examples there of giant catastrophic fails. Which we need case studies, and we need to keep those case studies alive and in everybody's view. That's why I say that people in this room bringing ethical conversations to the table. You are the way. You are the user experience. You are the front. You are the interface to potentially senior executives and or your colleagues and peers who may not be so engaged in this, sort of understanding what the issues might be. And back to my thing about breakage. It's like, break the assumptions, bring the case studies, tell the stories, ask the questions about, could that be us in the future? And my final kind of, human emotion, if you like, is shame. So one of the things that I think is very bad is shaming people who are well-intentioned and something goes wrong. I do think there are legal issues that need to be engaged with. Intentional harm needs to be dealt with. But very often, I'm thinking of Tay, the chatbot, right? That was so well-intentioned and it went really badly wrong. And I think that the response was very interesting and the response was pretty good and there was a lot of apology and it should never have happened, but it showed something very important. And so if you think something might be going wrong or there might be potential for something going wrong, have a conversation about that. Have a deeply engaged, design the solution with the people involved and bring the conversation to the table where you're explaining things to each other, because I've been in a couple of conversations where there's a lot of shame and blame, and I don't think shame and blame is helpful right now. I think what we really need to do is have a conversation. That is not to say, as I say, that there shouldn't be legal action in the case of intentional harm. And there are unintended consequences and unintentional harms that need to be debated and discussed. But if you're in your design team, have a conversation and think artfully about the case studies and lay them out and just say, could that be us?
I think also just to work with before we move on, I agree also completely. I think there's also ways you can sort of build that in, build sort of consideration of, you don't even have to call it ethical issues, any number of things, into the normal day-to-day sort of practices for thinking about it on par as if you're from the more engineering side of things, like whether you might do unit testing and sort of documentation or other sort of stand-ups or practices. Incorporating that in maybe under a different name, don't even call it ethics. Have that be normalized, a day-to-day sort of thing that becomes part of the routine.
So like a Q&A practice. Just like the IDEO ethics ones, exactly.
I really like how you frame the psychology of what you're working with the blame and shame areas. What kind of switch would you want to do to replace those emotions with a different emotion? Like, those are like what you shouldn't do, what you shouldn't feel.
I honestly think about excitement, right? So, I said about giddy excitement with my 3 monkeys who don't look, don't see, don't speak, right? There's a sort of giddy excitement around machine learning and AI and what it can do. Yay! On the other side, there's a, it's terrible. I had this picture of Maslow's hierarchy, actually, where, at the bottom there's sort of the basics, and at the top there's self-actualization. And in the contemporary press, if you invert it, so self-actualization and terror of the cyborg that's coming to destroy us all is like giantly represented, and then mundane machine intelligence, as I call it, at the bottom, which is underscoring all of those beautiful examples that we saw earlier, we need to really focus on these mundane moments of success and then be concerned about where they might push the boundaries and be, bad. And so rather than giant narratives, I think that, which are like, you're doing it wrong and that's bad and you don't understand the provenance of your data. I like small interventions, which are things like, do we have a Q&A process over the data quality? Is that something we like to have as a practice? Should we have, Friday afternoon tea session around everybody getting access to the data, everybody having a look about what I call scrutable data models rather than inscrutable. Let's have conversations about how do we design the user experience of getting into the data, of really interrogating the data, and make that a conversation for us all. Not, it's your job, data scientist, it's your job, engineer, and you messed it up because you didn't ask me questions. So we all need to be in the conversation. Now that does mean we have to break down some barriers and job ladders and job functions and build mutual respect, but I think if we all push together, maybe we have a chance.
Aww. I really enjoyed that everyone taking notes on that. Take it back. So the next question comes from a conversation in IDEO. They were talking about the tension between trust and transparency, and I was like, wait, they're kind of like, they go together. So it went a little back and forth, so we made the question a little bit more broad, because depending on your background, you have a different perspective on what those things mean. So taking that into account, how would you describe the relationship between trust and transparency?
Go first again. Yeah, I think thinking of these things, they're not necessarily trade-offs, but sometimes they are. These are two complex terms that also have a lot of other things wrapped into them. One thing, I guess we'll take just a couple of thoughts on that. Looking from the context of both in open source software and in scientific research, I think that there's a lot of fears that, or even presumptions that we can't make machine learning transparent. We can't make a lot of these complex things accessible, and I think I think there's many empirical cases where, from a practical perspective, I think Wikipedia actually is a really great example of showing how, not just from a technical perspective, they've been able to open source their whole pipeline, but also be able to selectively use certain machine learning techniques and not others, that because they have a strong commitment to openness and being able to explainability. So all machine learning is not created equal. There are certain methods that are more inscrutable than others and certain that are less, and those are decisions that you can make. You can say, and some of the ones that are more, they're more accurate, even in a statistical sense, come at the cost of interpretability. And so that's something to really consider that and put that on the table as a conversation piece. Do we want to have something that might be more, getting us a few, maybe fractions of a percentage point in precision and recall, versus something that we can actually look into more closely and see what's going on. But I also think that on the other side, I don't think that transparency automatically engenders trust. I forget a piece called about this, and beyond opening up the black box about Wikipedia, where Wikipedia has opened up so much of it. I think their pipeline, hardly anyone looks. And this is the thing. I think that they've done a whole lot of work where you don't they're making these things legible and human readable descriptions of what things are doing, using things like Jupyter notebooks to try to make them more accessible from a technical perspective. Hardly anyone looks. And so thinking about the incentive structures of how do we get people engaged with that? How do we bring people into a team who are going to be given the time, the responsibility, the agency, the capacity to gain a little bit of that expertise, to spend time thinking about what's going into it. That's also something, as opposed to just let's open source the data.
Yeah, I do think trust and transparency is so complicated. It's like trust with respect to what, and transparent to what degree, right? So, my tax accountant is very transparent. I don't understand the blooming word she says. And, I'm sorry, I just don't. And, I ask a question, and she's like, well, it's like this. And I'm like, I still don't understand. And I ask it again, and she says, no, it's like this. It's really obvious. And I'm like, I still don't get it. And we go back and forth and back and forth. And she can't speak my language, and I can't speak her language. And we're trying very, very hard. Do I trust her to do my taxes? Yes. Do I trust her to educate me on taxes? No. So it's trust with regard to what? And is there a mutual learning system going on here so that the transparency becomes really mutual transparency with regard to often very shifting goals? So are we maintaining transparency and communication as the world is changing around us? And I think my first example of the data sets, which were very, very, very small and very deeply engaged with very clear provenance, you know, I could understand what was in that data set very well. But in these giant systems where you don't know what the provenance is and how things are growing and where we're not co-developing, co-evolving. And I think trust requires a constant practice of transparency, again, a co-evolution.
So I was thinking of it from a slightly different perspective. When you, rather than sort of interpretability, transparency.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, of course. Right. What I have written myself here is positively but not perfectly correlated. I was thinking of this in the context of predictive modeling. That's mostly what I've been thinking about these days. And I think the more honest people can be about the shortcomings of the data that are used to train the model, what sort of blind spots they might have had in collecting that data, how some of the fields may have been collected that maybe incorporate to go back to what I talked about earlier, human bias or things like that, more people will trust that there's been some sort of thought that's gone into the process. And they'll be able to decide for themselves whether this model is maybe applicable to them, whether you could argue for why it isn't necessarily. Maybe they aren't part of the population that's necessarily represented by predictions from this model. And I think that could inspire a little bit more trust in it or in the system that's using the model, right? Maybe not necessarily the model itself, if you think the model doesn't apply to you, but more trust that it's going to be used in a way that you can argue against it, perhaps, if you think it doesn't. Another aspect I think of trust that comes in sort of different way of thinking about transparency a little bit is ability to test the models that you're getting. So even if you can't understand them perfectly, so even if you're using something that's very, very confusing, some boosted whatever, and it just doesn't, there's not really interpretable parameters or nothing, you know, giving access to some sort of API so you can try different inputs and see what the outputs are, I think is a great way for people to understand what the model is doing, even if they can't interpret the parameters or interpret the model itself necessarily. And I think that also helps you more trust that what's coming out is reasonable. You can put something in, you get something out that seems reasonable relative to what you expect. That's hopefully going to, you know, lead to more trust in the system. But again, it is, you know, I think a lot of this conversation is a little bit unsatisfying for a lot of people because it is also context specific. It's very hard to give some sort of like overarching rules, like people will trust your system or trust your model if you just do this. You know, it's all.
I was just going to add one thing to that. I completely agree with that because I think, you know, it's all changing so much. And what we really need is to educate each other as to even what the questions are, right? And I think that's why this, you mentioned, Dan, multidisciplinary, multi-perspectival. Having everybody come and look at this problem and these problems from a different perspective is so, so, so important. And people get really excited about what they're doing, you know, when somebody's like, I found this result, and it's really exciting. And you don't want to be like deflating, but you want to say, that's really exciting. Now, I wonder if this could be the case, you know, in a conversational way. Mm-hmm.
I think trust is social, and I think that if you're imagining a new technical feature that's going to come in and solve the trust problem, that's not the right way to be thinking about it. I think trust is a conversation, trust is a whole set of thing that you facilitate, not something that you build with.
Which brings us to, so with all that stuff in the background, looking forward, more futuristic, right? If you design a system that learns and changes over time, how do you ensure it doesn't start to break ethical principles down the line?
Constant vigilance. I wanted to start with that because I really like that eye movie and I'm taking up movie again. Harry Potter. That's not just professional thing, but in any case, yeah, constant vigilance. I think you as the model is deployed or as your system is deployed, you have to be conscious of feedback loops. How is what you're doing affecting the data that you're getting brought back into it? And predictive policing, this is one of the things you're thinking about. If you're using the model to make deployment decisions, that's where you're going to find more times. Those are where you fed back into the model. Those are likely going to be the places the model's going to be predicting our high crime because that's where you're finding them. So you can create these feedback loops. And of course, people have been thinking a lot about ways to solve that problem, but again, thinking about it in the current context is really important. So everyone always wants to bring up reinforcement learning at that point. And I'm not going to go into that whole spiel, but when we're talking about, again, imperfectly collected data by humans, that's not necessarily, though mathematically works out, the solution to everything we're talking about. I think we also have to worry about things like data drift. So you've built your model using data from one period of time that represents the state of the world at that period of time. The world changes. Things move. What that variable or what that data meant at that period of time might change in the course of as time moves on. Not just because of feedback loop you're creating, but just because the world is dynamic, right? So sort of retraining your model, making sure that it's keeping up with how the world's changing. And recognizing that validation is not forever. It's not some stamp that once you say, oh, this model's been validated, it's predictive of whatever it's doing what we want it to do, that that carries on forever. Sort of going back to the same idea that that sort of stamp of approval doesn't really get passed forward in time. That it's a constant process of making sure that things aren't changing. And then also as everyone's been talking about so far, as ethical standards change or as things come to your attention that maybe you weren't thinking of before. Stress testing, going in and saying, does this meet our new standards? As people bring attention to things like, say, gender bias in, automated translation, maybe that wasn't on the radar at the time. Now that it is, sort of keeping up with the standards and keeping up with things as they come to your attention, to make sure that you're not breaking the old standards that you wanted to meet, but also are meeting the new ones that are coming to your attention as people are looking through your models.
Yeah, I think that's completely agree. I think it's important to keep in mind in trying to implement those that every technical system is also a social system of people who maintain that technical system. And so in that social system, who are you empowering to do what? I think going to the case of I was saying about bridges earlier, so many of the bridges that have collapsed have been because of maintenance, not putting enough funding into maintenance and looking at the. And I think that sort of is your team structure, is your organizational structure, paying people and supporting people and putting people in roles where they are able to act on those kind of decisions. Ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, I think a lot of where we're at now is because of the culturally overloaded concept that innovation is so brilliant. Because actually the people who keep, the systems going, keep the lights on, constantly are checking, doing this sort of constant vigilance, doing this sort of, resilience engineering. Those are the real heroes. But what we do in our incentive structures within organizations, often also in our industry, is we benefit the people who innovate. And often those innovations are not tried and tested. They're often like sort of, super notionally sexy ideas. And there's a potential there, but, I have a whole other rant, which is about the concept of minimal viable product, right? Or, minimal viable in some context often means we've cut corners. We've cut corners around things like, simple things like accessibility, right? And so I just want to say that socio-technical system structure, the incentive structures that we have allowed and that we have been brought up in our industry may not be the right ones. And I personally think all of the heroes and heroines of the world are the ones who keep the lights on and do the constant integration and testing and who have the courage to say this was a good idea then, but with changing social norms, it is no longer a good idea. And we're going to take this out.
Yeah, so to make time for questions, we're going to wrap it up with a final question. In addition to constant vigilance, could everyone give one key recommendation for this specific audience that can take back to work and something practical?
I've been going first, so. Oh, no, I said good. So I would say one thing that I don't think that we've discussed as much explicitly, but I think is also really important too, is the importance of having a diverse team of people and coming in. I think ethics is a question of seeing things that other people might not see. And so making sure that, in addition to your organizational structures and incentive structures, making sure that needing to have a well represented across so many different axes of diversity will help you see so many different things quicker, faster, easier, and listening to and empowering people who have different opinions and positionalities as the norm, or is often where you get sort of the people who are going to tell you what's going to pop up.
That's so true. I'm just going to stick to my one talking. Think about how the data was generated, what you might be missing, and how that's going to affect what lines must.
Get your glossary of case studies and examples, and have those in your back pocket. And just think to yourself, why might this case study be reflective of my current situation? Do I see us, me, what I'm doing, any of what we're building in what this example has showcased? and have those examples, because, you know, storytelling is the best way to persuade people. Storytelling with really good stories, which are about, you know, do you think this could be us? Do you think we too might be missing essential data? Do you think we too might be, you know, targeting, you know, people too intensely? Do you think there's a lost opportunity here for us to do something better and different? So yeah, your glossary of case studies, and again, back to the opening comments here, get them from this community. You know, ask each other your stories and take your stories to each other's places, because you know, if you just discuss what's important in your stories and then share them, you'll have, you know, nice examples in your back pocket to illustrate why something should be done a different way.
A quick reminder, all panelists and moderators' opinions are their own and not reflective of any businesses that they might work for, past or future.
Awesome, thank you for the amazing panel. And also thank you, audience, for the awesome questions. What? We're gonna get started with, maybe we'll just do a handful of questions. The first question is, since many ML-driven recommendation systems reinforce biases in data, how do we highlight the systemic risk to non-IT professionals using these systems? Yes. Since many machine learning-driven recommendation systems reinforce biases in data, how do we highlight the systemic risk to non-IT professionals using these systems?
And I think for example, you know, part of what's hard about that is a lot of times, you know, some of these systems that we're talking about, particularly the ones I'm talking about, you know, they're using government or policing or things like that, they lack transparency, and it's proprietary systems, and there's not really a lot of opportunity to do those sort of examples, to, you know, like that I was showing earlier, where you actually see how it would operate in the big picture, right? Like who's promoting these are vendors or software a lot of times, and it's all very hidden, so it's difficult. But in my experience, anyway, you know, this one experience in any case, it has seemed pretty effective to give case studies or examples where you explicitly show, you know, this is the input data, this will be your output data, you can show what the problems are with input data, show what the consequences will be. I think a pretty effective way. I'm interested in hearing what other people think about that.
One thing Wikipedia does that's, I think, really interesting and powerful is instead of having one kind of classifier for quality to rule them all and sort of big ensemble kind of model, which is the sort of norm of a lot of times in state-of-the-art machine learning, they have a sort of practice where they have community labeling campaigns. You might sort of have something, and then they'll go into multiple independent classifiers that people can operate independently. So one is trained on Wikipedians who say this is damaging, not damaging. Another one is this is a good faith edit, bad faith edit. Another's a 1 to 7 quality score. Those produce different outputs, and I think that that's been a really powerful way to show how powerful it is to have the data coming in. Can give you so many different kinds of results for things that you might think are pretty much the same, right? But not.
I just think that also just things like what we're doing now, raising awareness, is really important, because I know it's at a different scale right now, but people have been making good and bad decisions based on absolutely crappy data for a very long time, since the first moment of counting, right? And so, you know, we've had like, you know, partial data, incorrect data, you know, made up data. I mean, actually, intelligence scores, the whole world of intelligence testing, you know, has all of these really, really dubious psychologists behind, right? So, you know, Sir Cyril Burt, who had all of these ideas about intelligence and hereditary, you know, sort of, you know, family dynamics and, you know, inheritance. You know, the data was made up. The data was just made up. So his research assistant thought, you know, oh, I can't be bothered to go out and actually do the work, so I'm going to make the data up. I'm exaggerating slightly, but not very much. So we have a lot of constructs in our world which are based on crappy data that were, or no data at all, that were assumptions. We've talked about biases. There's a huge amount of incredibly biased assumption based on, I don't know, you know, 1800s Victorian gentlemen in pith helmets going around and, you know, talking about what these people were like versus those people. So we've been doing this for a very long time as humans. So let's not think we're that different now. It's just we're doing it at a particular scale. So I just think, being very practical, telling stories, getting the word out, and trying to get people who may be not super technical to understand that they shouldn't necessarily trust everything. But it's not that at the opposite end, everything is completely bad either. So just leveling up the discourse around these things would be fantastic. Honestly, I would also just love, when they first started to have like shopping recommendations or whatever, I used to work at eBay and I love eBay. So you get all these recommendations. I kind of liked it when people start, when it would start to tell you, you're being recommended this because of all of these other things. And I go, oh, that's really interesting. Because that wasn't for me, that was for you. In fact, it was a gift. But I just think those sorts of playful moments of transparency, they can be made super playful. User experience design people. Let's start to this recommendation for you is based on some great super crappy data, but we just thought we would give it to you anyway because we didn't want you to have a blank screen. Whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? Let's be playful as well as informational, just to get it in people's heads that maybe they can ask questions.
That's awesome. One more question. As intelligent systems take on more humane qualities, how do we adjust our judgments of these systems?
I frankly don't understand humans very much, so I just think we use the same techniques that we use when we meet another person. Look at this room. The reason we talk about trust is because you're all here because we have a shared interest, right? We're already making judgments about each other based on some context. And I think that as systems become more human-like, they're going to have the same problems and the same issues, and the cute little now robots run around and do things, and they're super interesting. But I sort of try to interrogate them as to what they can and can't do, just as I'm assess another person, really. You're all right. We chatted over there. You recommended the fries, and they were really good. So yeah.
But I think it's important to on one hand, keep in mind and think about ways in design that these things are not humans, and that can actually be a problematic way to and they're kind of thinking about the uncanny valley as a sort of thing. That maybe there are sort of moments to keep it in the uncanny valley, but maybe playfully, the idea to think about it, how to playfully, remind people that this actually isn't a human, because that actually, that they expect that it is human, and then it does something that a human can't do, or it doesn't have the capacity. Someone wants to do something a human can't do. That's not going to be a good experience. But I also think it's important to keep in mind too that they are human in the sense that the data comes from humans, and they're made by humans, and they're maintained by humans. So keeping that parallel, kind of draw. I'm not sure how to do that with design. I think design has a major role to play in how we sort of navigate between that
Awesome. How about one more question? Then we can all go through networking and be more friends. Okay. Last question. Why are platforms so hesitant to define their ethical values? Is this a reasonable position? If not, what is the argument for them to take a stand? Sorry, I didn't write these questions, so reading them out loud is a little bit weird to me.
Why do platforms take an ethical stance?
Why don't they take ethical stance? And what maybe can we do to have platforms take ethical stance? And I think a lot of us might work for platforms to try to convince them to take ethical stance. So,
I think raising awareness that whatever action you take, whether you think it's ethical or not, in fact has an ethical standing, right? So you might not go in thinking that design this algorithm or this platform ethically, but you are embodying a set of ethics, and if you haven't critically interrogated what those are, then they are ad hoc and maybe in conflict with each other. And I think we talked a little bit about the business models earlier, and I do believe that the business models that have gotten us to where we are have a very particular code of ethics, which was to a very particular outcome and a very particular set of investments and investors. And I think we're starting to question what some of those are. So I would say that all platforms have an ethical stance, whether they articulate it as an ethical stance or not. And they may, in fact, have multiple conflicting ethical stances. And so then the only way forward is really to raise the conversation. And again, super practical. This isn't going to happen by somebody out there who, the overlords aren't going to decide benignly. It's our job. It's our job, collectively. No matter how small you feel in the cog, it's our job to say, I see conflicting ethical stances embodied into the infrastructure, in our practices at work, and in our job letters, and in the way that we incent people. I see conflicting ethical stances. And I know everybody's trying to do their best and their good intentions, but can we have a conversation about alignment of the ethical stances that sit within these socio-technical subsystems that are organizations and our industry and beyond?
I think just the first question, why are they reluctant to put them out there? I mean, I don't work for so I'll just be cynical and put the grunt like I usually am in these rooms. I think it's because once you've articulated those principles, people can hold you to them, and they can point out when you haven't upheld them. And that puts you in an awkward situation. Now you put it out into the world that you're going to do this and you didn't. People could point to something versus what you said you would do and you didn't. And then you look like a hypocrite or a liar, and no one wants to look like that. So
You get slippery, don't you? You get slippery. You're like, well, when we said that, that word, you think it means this, but actually what we meant by that word was that. Did I say was? I meant wasn't.
So completely agree. I love it. That's what I think. It's a reticence to. I think there's a lot of. I think they don't know what their own ethical stances are, and to formalize that also takes work and expertise that may not happen. That may not have that occur at the C level. And I think understanding ethics as a field of expertise, and I've actually visited ethics and policy. I think a lot of these questions are about policy and formalization. And I also say this as a veteran of Wikipedia's battle over date formatting, right? You can go deep. Wikipedia go deep into policy and stylistic differences and what national variety of English are we going to use or things like that. All kinds of things happen, but then that takes up time, that takes up expertise, and that takes up a lot of that needs to be its own unit as opposed to something that we expect, as a CEO or someone sort of at the executive level to sort of. I think it's actually asking too much of them to, on their own, develop what is basically these platforms are effectively kinds of governments. We're expecting them to sort of write a whole new legal system. That's going to require a lot of expertise that we need entirely new teams for.
Fantastic. You're just at time. I want to thank our amazing panelists. And you guys will be sticking around for a little bit afterwards? Yeah? I know that there are some more questions out there, so please find them afterwards. I just have a couple more words. You guys can down. Welcome to and thank you so much, Sherry, for moderating too. Okay. I do want to say a huge thank you again to IDEO for sponsoring. This has been an awesome event. Our volunteers have counted, and there were 100 people here at least. So that is a ton. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Also, thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing their insights and knowledge. And truly, I hope that you have learned something and you are able to take it back to your teams and you feel inspired to be that chief ethics officer. Did it work better that time? Yeah. On your teams, but really asking these questions, thinking about through these problems, think about what it actually means in your products. I think it's really important. That's why we're holding this talk. Also, want to sponsor, speak, say hi, humans at MLUXSF.com. I think you all are very familiar with our Twitter by now. Thank you very much, everyone. But you can also tweet at us and everything too. But I'll be around, so come by, say hi. Thank you so much, everybody.
Before you go, thank you, Michelle. Thank you.